He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today, my friends, we are heading back into the wonderful world of UFOs, UAPs. Now, this may be a double week whammy, as next week's topic may also be exploring UFOs. With the eclipse that happened this past week, Reuben shared some interesting things with me regarding the possibility of unknown flying object activity. So stay tuned possibly for that. I'm not committing to it, but there's a chance, if Reuben's available, that we're going to get into that next week. So until then, this week, we're talking about a recent document that was released to the public by the Australian Defence Department. Now, under the Freedom of Information Act of 1982, this act gives you the right to access information held by the Defence Department, as well as other Commonwealth agencies. From what I found, a person would submit a request for documents being held, and after assessing the request, documentation would be provided unless an exemption applies. It's a handy act to rely on if there is something, or really anything specifically you are looking for. Of course, you have to know specifically what it is you are trying to acquire. So it's sort of a double-edged sword almost, either for you or against you. But to summarize how that act works, you submit a request in writing stating the information you want. And you also have to give enough detail to help the agency identify and locate the desired documents. In this case, it worked out because the document was targeted and released to the public. Entitled as a 10-page dossier, it covers investigations and other reports that were created between July and October of 2023, along with 17 Department of Defense communications about UFOs and UAPs. I do want it to be known, however, that in comparison to the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, that Australia's government doesn't share the same level of interest in the UFO UAP phenomenon. And I quote, "There is no scientific or other compelling reason to continue to devote resources to the recording and investigation of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Defense does not have a policy on the reporting of unidentified aerial phenomena by either members of the public or defense members," end quote. And that came from the Australian Department of Defense, and it highlights one of our world's biggest problems, is the fact that unknown things are flying above our heads, and we have no proper portal to report them. And look back a few weeks ago when we examined the mysterious lights the airline pilots spotted over Saskatchewan. They didn't have any proper way to report it, at least in a way that would be evaluated and examined later on properly. It just always baffles me that you have thousands of planes flying in the sky at various altitudes, and one of the least concerns airlines have is a proper reporting system to help learn and prevent any dangerous close encounters with civilian aircraft. And unknown objects, of course. And I would say I doubt a collision could ever happen, but that's not 100%. It's impossible. In fact, we've seen plane accidents before, some flights just even vanishing with no trace left behind, but I digress. That's a whole other can of worms. I will include a link to this dossier in the description below for you to view on your own accord, but otherwise I'm going to move through it, and I've kind of isolated points that I want to talk about, and I will quote it now as I progress through it. And one last thing here, it's also important to note how much common referencing there is here regarding the United States Congress meeting on the UAP UFO topic, but I digress. And I quote, "Talking points. Under Air Force aviation protocols, there's been no records of observations or sightings of unidentified aircraft over the past 10 years. Any unidentified aircraft identified by Air Force pilots or personnel entering military-controlled airspace or posing a safety risk to military aircraft are subject to Air Force aviation safety reporting protocols." Air crew can report unidentified aircraft to airspace control agencies and report unusual or unexpected activity through aviation safety procedures. We are aware of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, within the United States Department of Defense and continue to monitor their reports. We are aware of the latest reporting on 19th of April 2023 that they are examining a number of cases. However, they've not found any credible evidence of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. The Air Force's position continues to be that there is no scientific or other compelling reason to divert resources to the recording and investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. This aligns resources with the priorities, mission, and objective of defense. End quote. Now, we mentioned the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution. In short, it's a platform that serves as a submission point for current and former U.S. government employees, service members, or contractor personnel with direct knowledge of U.S. government programs or activities relating to UAPs date back to 1945. And it's an office that exists within the United States Office of the Secretary of Defense that focuses on investigating all these types of phenomena. Established in 2022, it was preceded by another program that also was used to record UAP sightings. So that's where when I say that date, 1945, that just has been an evolving state of office that's turned into different names and different group members and whatnot, and now its latest evolutionary form, I guess you could say, is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution. So getting back to the dossier, and I quote, on 19th of April 2023, the United States Department of Defense released a news article on the testimony of Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. At their Senate Armed Services Committee's Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, the article summarizes Kirkpatrick's testimony. An unidentified aerial phenomena is anything in space, in the air, on land, in sea, or under the sea that cannot be identified and might pose a threat to United States military installations or operations. The department is working to better understand and respond to unidentified aerial phenomena. All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office scientists continue to improve their data collection and implementation of rigorous scientific and intelligence analysis to resolve cases in a systematic and prioritized manner. Only a very small percentage of unidentified aerial phenomena reports display signatures that could be reasonably prescribed as anomalous, and the majority of reports demonstrate mundane characteristics of balloons, unmanned aerial systems, clutter, natural phenomena, or the other readily explainable resources. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office have found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. End quote. So what's interesting here is more elaboration on the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's actions. And you have Sean Kirkpatrick, whose testimony was referenced in a news article, was the first director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and was also an assistant professor of physics at the University of Georgia. He joined up with the Air Force Research Laboratory in 1997 and had eventually moved into the CIA in 2003. And I quote, on the 11th of January 2023, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence delivered the annual report on unidentified aerial phenomena, now unidentified anomalous phenomena, to Congress as reported by their National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022. The report summaries that unidentified aerial phenomena continue to represent a hazard to flight safety and pose a possible adversary collection threat. Since their publication of their preliminary assessment in June 2021, unidentified aerial phenomena reporting has increased, however, could be attributed to a concentrated effort to destigmatize the topic. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has been established as the United States Department of Defense focal point for unidentified aerial phenomena. Coordinated efforts between the United States Department of Defense and other government agencies to collect and report unidentified aerial phenomena events have resulted in increased data sets spanning multiple security domains. The report does not draw conclusions on what unidentified aerial phenomena are, and most remain unexplained, mainly due to the lack of data. The report did reach the following conclusions. In a limited number of incidents, unidentified aerial phenomena reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, and these observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperception and require additional rigorous analysis. There are probably multiple types of unidentified aerial phenomena requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behaviors described in the available reporting. unidentified aerial phenomena clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to United States national security. Unidentified aerial phenomena would also represent a national security challenge if they are foreign adversary collection platforms or provide evidence of a potential adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. Historically, the Air Force was responsible for handling unidentified aerial phenomena reports. However, that ceased in 1996. If civilians wish to report unidentified aerial phenomena, they should contact their local police authorities or get in contact with a civil unidentified flying object research organization. End quote. There's a lot to unpack in that, and I think it's interesting because they talk about needing large volumes of data to analyze something. They can't just say, oh, we got a sighting here, someone saw a triangle up on the sky. No, they need to go in, they need to inspect the situation. Is this really a weather balloon? Is it another branch of government? Is it another country that's doing data observation or something that's just to either collect, I guess you could say, as well, based on it being weather or information. I mean, we went through this whole debacle months ago when we had the balloons flying over North America, and it was just, oh, weather balloons. And to be honest, the truth is very convoluted around that, and it's unfortunate that that's ancient history, but I'm glad that we actually covered it at the time because there is a lot of information circling around that was really good to just talk about and to get out onto the table for conversation. But those are the types of things that need to be explored and just kind of filtered through by this agency as they kind of find out what the truth is. And the truth is very difficult to obtain because there's so much information that they need to dissect and deep dive into. So even at the end of it, they might not even get that proper answer. I mean, most cases here, you probably don't get any answer at all. All you can do is just find, like what they said, it's unidentified and we have no proper explanation for what it is. But then you have to also attribute the fact that maybe it is sensors that are tweaking. Our technology is limited in some regards. It's not perfect. And when you're dealing with other things flying around, that technology could misidentify what you're viewing. And human perception is definitely one thing. And it's amazing how that plays a part in seeing cryptids and other mysterious things when you're boots on the ground, I could say. But at the end of the day, I think when you have multiple people seeing the same thing, like those airline pilots that were all converging over the airwaves saying, hey, are you seeing this? Yeah, I'm seeing this. You're seeing this. And they're relaying it to their traffic control tower. That's when things get interesting because is this really human misperception? I think you can dismiss that at that point because multiple different perspectives are witnessing the same thing. However, I digress. The last note that I mentioned, it hits home. That's where they were talking about the Air Force, was responsible for handling unidentified aerial phenomenal reports, but that ceased in 1996. And if civilians wish to report anything about that, they should contact local police authorities. And I understand that perhaps after enough reports and blatant display of being both outmaneuvered and either skill or technology as a government, we would want to cease wasting resources on what are probably just plethora of calls weekly regarding new unidentified sightings across your entire country. That can be exhausting, especially, as I said, you're diverting so many resources already to going through and siphoning these reports. So you have to cap it at some point, I imagine, or let's be very bold here with this hypothetical situation. All this is just one big stage play. Sightings of all kinds are mysterious to us, but not to the government, because maybe they met with whatever intelligent beings are piloting these objects, hypothetically. And perhaps they have already figured out that what they needed to understand with them it's been capped. They don't need to know anything more. So regarding them as a threat to national security, maybe they can just dismiss it. They have the reassurances now to dismiss their activity, hence the ceasing of Air Force response and responsibility in 1996. There's no cause for concern. But for the people, I mean, people are people, and it seems like the government's got a pretty good grasp on keeping things going the way, for the most part, how they want things to be going. And I say that loosely with a very unbiased perspective. I digress, however. Now, again, purely hypothetical, and I'm just playing with a loose concept factually based on nothing, aside from the one examined fact in this dossier that the Air Force was no longer involved in 1996. It could be for any number of reasons: rising tensions overseas, economic turmoil, just plain and simple that we need to reallocate our resources because it's costing us too much. But who knows? the government doesn't just turn a blind eye, and that's me being biased now. They don't just throw the blanket over the unknown without good reason. I feel like that there is something there that could cause a potential threat to national security. The government is going to make every point to inquire and be involved with what is going on, at least on a need to know basis. When I say government, it could easily be, it could come down to accountability. You could have government, and you could have government that needs to remain impartial to these types of organizations and this type of knowledge. So you have contracted private organizations that are hired and brought on by government. Not every member of government would know about these things, but you have these private organizations that are basically doing all the dirty work and looking into this stuff. And basically they would, okay, here you go. They throw a document or a little folder in front of whatever government official's asking, and they open it up and they look at it. It's like, yeah, the big smiley face, everything is okay. You don't need to worry. And that's all they need to know. Maybe it's just as simple as plausible deniability. Who knows? That's going down another can of worms that takes a little bit more research and probably a few more clearance levels to figure out than I'm more capable of acquiring, but I digress. I'm going to highlight some questions here regarding budgetary estimates from the dossier. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I think it's important to focus on the method of reporting and the many different avenues directed to them. And that's, again, what's referenced here. I think it's quite funny how frequently and consistent they're placed throughout this whole file. So these 3 questions I list here will be followed by 3 responses, and I quote, "During the last supplementary budget estimates, in response to a question on notice, the Department of Defense advised that there is no protocol for reporting or recording unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified flying objects. In a scenario that an Air Force pilot or Air Force personnel on the ground, such as monitoring radar, detects or sights an aircraft over Australian airspace or in the sphere of operation, but is unable to identify the nature of the craft, what is the process or protocol for pilot and or personnel to report their observation? Number 2, if there is an existing protocol, how many such observations or sightings have been made in the past 10 years? If there's no protocol, by what means does the Air Force maintain the security of Australian airspace in dealing with unidentified craft? Number 3, what encouragement is given to pilots to make reports of aircraft they cannot identify? Answer to number 1, any unidentified aircraft identified by Air Force pilots or personnel entering military-controlled airspace or pose a safety risk to military aircraft are subject to the RAAF Aviation Safety Reporting Protocols. Answer number 2, under the RAAF Aviation Reporting Protocols, there has been no records of observations or sightings of unidentified aircraft over the past 10 years. And answer to number 3, there is no specific encouragement given to pilots to report aircraft they cannot identify, rather to report unusual or unexpected events through the RAAF Aviation Safety Reporting Procedures. In closing, the Department of Defense does not have a protocol for reporting or recording of unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified flying objects." End quote. Now, we discussed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, but remember, that is an office within the United States, not Australia. It's important to note that sightings in the last 20 to 10 years are pretty much non-existent here in Australia from a reporting point of view. So that doesn't rule out or dismiss these things from still occurring. Most people really don't look up these days, especially in a denser cityscape. When you have so many lights, you're not going to see the stars as well. But it's possible that people located in more remote communities just don't bother reporting it. And that's me putting forward ideas to explain why sightings are devoid in the last couple decades. It's not factual reasoning as to why. So, in closing, I do have a couple of reports from decades ago that I just wanted to slide in here for you guys' entertainment and benefit. So, the first one, and I quote, "My name is Patrick Knowles. My family and I have been the victim of a media frenzy since the first telling of our story. Now, I very much regret making it public. We have experienced unrelenting ridicule, being described as crazy or accused of making up a hoax just for money and so on. But we only wanted people to know what happened to us. We weren't after anything. It happened on January 20, 1988. My mother, 2 brothers, and I were driving from Perth to Melbourne. We were going to drive straight through in shifts, and we planned to cross the desert at night when the heat wasn't so bad. By 2:30 a.m., we were in the Nullarbor Plain. We stopped for petrol and switched drivers. Sean was driving, and I was in the front seat next to him. The road was empty. Suddenly, we saw a bright yellow light up ahead and Sean slowed down. As we got closer, the yellow light seemed to be emanating from an egg-shaped object hovering just above ground level. We thought we might be seeing things, but then a caravan passed going the other way, and it swerved sharply to avoid this luminous egg. The closer we got to it, the more we realized it wasn't a normal vehicle or a road sign or anything like that. Sean swerved to avoid it, and we continued on, leaving it behind. Suddenly, the object started towards us. It appeared to accelerate with tremendous speed. We drove on, and it literally chased us. The faster we went to get away from it, the faster this object went after us. I reckon we reached a speed of 125 miles per hour, but it caught up in a matter of seconds. Then Sean made a sudden U-turn and headed back west in the direction of the petrol station. The UFO also turned around. Well, I don't know how the hell it was flying because it didn't have wings or anything like wings. It just kept coming after us. Sean made another fast U-turn heading back toward Melbourne again, but the UFO turned as well and kept pace with the car. In the back seat, everyone was scared. The dogs started barking and whining. And suddenly, we were hit. It shot a beam of light out and punctured our back tire. The back tire was on fire, and we started sliding across the road. I realized if we braked, we would have to confront the UFO, but Sean didn't have a choice. And then it landed on the roof of the car and picked the car up. It lit up the car like a microwave. The heat was intense. Our hair was standing straight up, and we felt really funny, like we're being dehydrated. It was awful, frightening, like our brains were being sucked out. My fear was that I would be pulled out of my body, and I put my hand out of the window and touched something spongy that burned my hand. I thought we were going to die. You could actually feel the car rising in the air, and the car began to fill with a thick black fog. It was so hot, and all this junk started covering us. Our voices started changing. You know how a tape deck sounds when the batteries start to go flat? That's what it was like, and then I passed out. I came to when I heard a tremendous noise like a bang, and our car suddenly dropped back to earth. Dawn was coming up, the thing just flew away, and that was the last we saw of it. I had to change the tire, and we tried to clean out the black soot. There were marks on the roof of the car, and as soon as we could, we drove fast to the nearest roadhouse. We were too shocked to talk for a while, and then we realized we had lost a couple hours of time during the incident. We called the police. The funny thing was, they were already looking for us. Someone, maybe the people in the caravan we passed, had phoned the police anonymously. Their report states that they witnessed our car being picked up off the road and shaken violently. They noticed that the car was covered in black ash, and the police inspected our car and noted the ash, the bad smell, and the dents on the roof. They were convinced something had occurred, and they took us to the hospital where we were treated for burns and shock, but then the media got hold of the incident. I don't think a single reporter or journalist asked us sensible questions or tried to console us for our fear. They just wanted to humiliate us. When our car was examined by forensic scientists, they found high unexplained concentrations of chlorine, an element not usually present in cars, animals, or the desert environment. My family does not need proof of this sort because we all know what we witnessed and what we went through that night. End quote. I thought this was really, really interesting, and I think that the fact that they were able to deduce and detect certain chemicals and certain types of remnants on top of this vehicle after this experience, it doesn't always explain for what they weren't able to detect. I mean, sure, some things could appear like, oh, we haven't discovered this yet, but are they really going to be able to have that level of technology at this time to identify that? They're going to do a sweep and they're going to be able to tell, oh, this is that. But the things that they don't know, maybe they don't exist on our planet, they're not going to be able to deduce what those things are. Unless they're scanning for what's on the periodic table, but I'm not sure if that's technically what the team here was doing. It's these cases, though, that have missing time that always tend to get me. I have a sweet spot for that kind of thing, and in this case, the passerby is reporting to the local authorities something's going wrong, and the police couldn't find the individuals after an extensive amount of time. I remember watching a few episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, and it was the odd UFO-focused episode that had people in a vehicle that were subject to being completely vanished for a period of time. If you're a returning listener, you know I'm a big advocate for having others nearby when you experience these unknown things like this. You have to communicate and talk to each other because some folks will shut down and just never talk about it when sometimes they could see or notice something you don't in the experience. And of course, you're going to be traumatized. That's totally justified when you're experiencing and seeing something that should not be real. In this case, they were quiet, but it seems like this family has reaffirmed with each other they know what they saw and they're standing by it. And when you have the media back then at this time, I've dipped my toes into some of those old newspaper reports, and sometimes the media can just get really flamboyant with different opinions and people's perspectives. And I think at a time when you're dealing with humiliation and deterrency, you're not going to want to come forward and talk about these things, because if you're anything but normal, you're going to get ridiculed at this time. Even in today's society, it's very difficult to try and still be yourself, because there's a lot of humiliation and ridicule that circles around in society these days, and it's difficult. And it is hard for people to talk about these things, but I digress. In our last sighting of the episode, we're going to go back here 2 decades, and I quote, "My name is Alex James. I live in Pila Pila Community, New Guinea, and about 7 p.m. last Tuesday, November 6, 1999, I went out with 4 friends to the community school for rugby practice. We were going back to our village after dark when we saw some bright lights approaching. There were a lot of people about, some coming back from bathing, and others were sitting around eating their dinners. When they saw the lights, they all ran inside and were locking their doors, except for a few who just stood and stared. As this UFO approached us, we heard no sound. The streetlights all dimmed, just like a torch would when the batteries are failing, and it hovered over the coconut palms and looked huge. It was oblong in shape, and as it passed slowly overhead, my friends and I were almost frozen as we watched it. We felt as though we could not move or speak because we were just so shocked by the sight. The bottom of the UFO was oblong shaped with very bright lights all around the edges, and the top was like a pyramid shape with lights around it also. Just bright white, no colors. It was huge and took over 30 minutes to pass by. We checked the time. When it was hovering over us, it seemed to be as bright as day. The whole place lit up like bright daylight, and that's how bright its lights were. Then the object just disappeared in the direction over the mountains near Vuvu." End quote. This is interesting because it seems like it's quite the opposite of the previous experience where they kept track of time. But again, you have multiple people that experience this, and it's a relatively small community at this time. And as overwhelming as this appears, it also does feel more isolated and remote, but that doesn't disregard the experience whatsoever. Even more so because this was an extended duration sighting with a vivid description of what is seen. The underneath being an oblong type shape is definitely not a first. Of course, with the pyramid of the upper side being described and the lights all around it, it's a reoccurring description in the UAP UFO community, I would dare say. As mentioned at the start, I've included a link to the dossier below in this episode description, and it's worth a look at just because I condensed the parts that I thought were relevant to the trajectory of this episode, but you can explore a lot more in the questions that are in the dossier and the answers that are thrown back as well. So it'll help build your perspectives, which in turn can maybe help you learn something new or notice something others don't, and help deduce more of just this information to figure out the ever unknown growing truth. So until next time, remember you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon. And if you ever wish to reach out directly to us to say hi or share, you can find us at CryptidClues@gmail.com. We'll be back next Monday. As I said at the beginning of this episode, I'm going to try and snag Reuben down, and he can give me the layout of everything that went on with this eclipse that I completely did not indulge in. Where we are here, it was just a super cloudy day, and we were only benefiting from like a partial eclipse. We didn't get the full on experience of just the sun being blocked out. So those two things, the clouds and the partial, just didn't make it the overall greatest experiences. Others got to enjoy a beautiful, beautiful sighting. So I'm curious to know what Reuben has discovered on the UFO UAP front that is in relation to the solar eclipse. But until next time, everyone, thanks again for listening. And remember, take care and stay safe.